Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk Nerdy. Today is Monday, October 20th, 2025, and I'm the host of the show, Dr. Cara Santamaria. And as always, I want to thank those of you who make Talk Nerdy possible. Remember, Talk Nerdy is and will always be free to download. And the way we keep this show going, the way that we pay those who need to be paid, is by relying on the support of individuals just like you. This week's top supporters include Chuck Blell, David J. E. Smith, Daniel Lang, Mary Neva, Joseph Lamore, Anu Badavaj, David Compton, Brian Holden, Gabrielle F. Jaramillo, Ulrika Hagman, and Pasquale Gelati. Oh, and Joe Wilkinson. You're always right below the fold, Joe. I'm so sorry about that. So whenever I scroll, it always sneaks up on me. And so many more. If you would like to pledge your support on an episodic basis, all you've got to do is visit patreon.com/talknerdy to learn more. All right, let's get into it. This week, I had the opportunity to interview someone who was on this show I think 4 years ago now. Dr. Ainissa Ramirez was here previously to talk about a book that she had written called The Alchemy of Us. She is a material scientist, but also a prolific science communicator. And she started at Bell Labs after she did her PhD in material science and engineering from Stanford. And after Bell Laboratories, she moved on to work as an associate professor of mechanical engineering at Yale. Since then, she has written 2 books. We're going to be talking about her newest one now, and co-authored another, and written for a bunch of different outlets that you probably read regularly, like Forbes and Time and The Atlantic and Siam. And she's, done a lot of media appearances too, from CNN to NPR to PBS and many more. She also hosts a science podcast called Science Underground, and she has a new book out. It's actually a really beautifully and richly illustrated children's book called Spark, Jim West's Electrifying Adventures in Creating the Microphone. So without any further ado, here she is, Dr. Ainissa Ramirez. Well, Ainissa, thank you so much for joining me today again, now for the second time. It's very exciting.
How lucky am I? Yes, it's so good to be here.
And we were just saying offline that we recently saw each other. Well, recently is, I guess, a relative term, probably about 6 months ago, for an event at MIT back in March, where we were sort of talking about like science communication and the new media landscape and, the current administration and what we're up against. It was, really interesting, but oh man. It raised a lot of concerns too.
Yeah, it was so timely, but
Mm-hmm.
at that point, it was so early on that we didn't really have solutions. So it was good to just have a convening so that people can see each other and feel seen.
Absolutely. And so the last time that you were on the show, as I mentioned, I pulled up the episode, Our Material World, on February 22nd, 2021. It's when we were talking about your award-winning book, The Alchemy of Us. And we talked a lot about your work as a material scientist. We also talked about, SciComm and things like that. And we talked about the book itself, a lot of the really interesting sort of uses of materials and how different inventions really change the way that we live our lives today. But you have a new book, and like, in some senses of the word, it's a huge left turn. In other sense of the word, it's a fastball down the middle, right?
It is. I mean, I love sharing science, and during COVID, I wasn't able to really pursue a book for older readers. I mean, I just couldn't get to libraries and archives. The world was shut. It was a terrible time. But I needed to do something because I was itching to just, find ways to get science to people. And so I had been wanting for a long, long time to write children's books. And I knew of some people who I thought there should be children's books written about. And so I just started getting busy on that.
And so when we say children's books and people who the children's book should be about, I love this because in some ways, yes, I guess it's a children's book. It's a children's science book, but it's also biographical. And it's also kind of, I mean, the it's so rich with illustration. To me, it reads like a graphic novel for kids.
Right, right. Well, it's a picture book, and it
Mhm.
is using the same skills that I had in writing The Alchemy of Us, which is to do a deep dive of nonfiction to write people's biographies. I specialize in writing biographies about people who've been overlooked, and so this picture book is just of the same ilk. It's just that it's targeted to a different audience this time.
I love that. And so tell me a little bit about who you worked with, for the illustrations, because it's such a, integral part of the book.
Well, the book is called Spark, and the subtitle is Jim West Electrifying Adventure in Creating the Microphone. And Jim West is an African American inventor who is 94 now. And
Oh,
he's still
I
alive. Oh, yes.
love that.
And he's created one of the most used technologies on the planet. In fact, it's making this recording possible. He made the microphone.
Yeah.
And he had a lot of experiments. When I say experiments, they were really mishaps with
Mhm.
electricity. And I thought that the best way to convey that would be with a style of illustrations that lended itself to a graphic novel. And so I
Mhm.
was teamed up with this great illustrator, Setor. And what's great about Setter is that he actually has an engineering science background before he switched into being an illustrator. So throughout the book, he has fantastic details that an engineer would appreciate.
Yeah.
Curves and features that you would see in an electrical schematic, like all these little Easter eggs throughout. And of course, he just has this very vibrant style. So to me, it just seemed like the perfect arranged marriage.
Oh, absolutely. I'm looking even just it opens up with Jim West, I guess, kind of playing with a pocket watch and, opening it up and learning how it works and just seeing every single teeny tiny component kind of laid out in exquisite detail. It's really lovely.
Well, I think Setter was really, like I said, he's a tremendous talent, but he was really trying to show how curious and deliberate that Jim West was, even at a very young age. He took a lot of things apart, got in trouble for it, but that didn't stop him because he really wanted to learn about how things worked. And the story that he told me is that he took apart his grandfather's pocket watch, and that there were 103 pieces in it. So he counted them, and he got to know what each piece did, but he couldn't put it back together. And so that's the reason why he got in trouble. And so I think the illustration is trying to show that he was very deliberate about learning, okay, what does this do? And what does this do? This kind of looks like an arm and this kind of looks like a spring. Wanted to learn about what each piece did. But in the end, there was no manual to put it all back together. So he got in tremendous trouble for that.
So it sounds to me then like you had the incredible opportunity to actually speak with Jim West, to interview him and to try and understand his perspective as you were writing the book.
Absolutely. Well, I have to back up. I met him long ago when I was when I was a newly minted scientist at Bell Laboratories. So Jim West
Mm.
had been at Bell Labs maybe 40 years. So maybe I caught him at the 20-year or 25-year mark. So, and he was a star then. And here I am, a new PhD, and I asked him, I'm like, would it be possible for me to have coffee with you, thinking maybe I can get 10 minutes of his time? And he's like, let's do lunch. And I was like, oh, okay. And
Oh.
so we're in the Bell Labs cafeteria, and I don't really remember what we talked about. I was just trying not to drip food on my lap, and
Yeah.
not to sweat too hard. But I did know that I had met someone who was like a tremendous man. I knew that. And I felt I think I was buzzing the rest of the day. I don't think I got any work done. But that just kind of put a seed in my head, because 20 years later, the movie Hidden Figures came out. And that touched me personally because I didn't know that story. And then it also touched me because I said, I think there are other hidden figures that are out there, and I think I met one. So this is what put me on the path to get in touch with Jim again, and I was able to interview him a number of times so I can get his story onto these pages.
Oh, I love that. And so before we dive into his, particular story, I want to touch on something you mentioned there, this idea that or this recognition that there are so many hidden, and that really is an important term there,
Mm,
figures. It's not that they're just it's not like these stories weren't told because there weren't that many people, or yes, it's true that Black individuals of the time did not have the opportunities, obviously, that that white individuals had. But even beyond that, even though they didn't have those opportunities, there were so many incredible people doing incredible things, but their stories just weren't told.
Absolutely. And I would add to that, there are many inventions made by people of color that we use today and we don't know the origin story. So again,
Mm.
as I mentioned, the microphone that's in front of me, this is made possible by Jim West. 2 billion microphones based on his design are manufactured every year. So his name should
Wow.
be up there with Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, Marconi. He is of that lineage. So it's
Yeah.
more than just, hidden figures. It's like the magnitude of this particular inventor is huge.
And I think the important term there, what I like about the term hidden figures, which I don't know if the film, perhaps the book gets into it more. I think the film is a celebration and a struggle, and it's absolutely beautiful, and I loved it. But maybe what's not made too explicit is that there's an intentionality behind the word hidden, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
like, figures that never made it to the limelight. It's not like figures that were
Right.
dimmed in the shadows. It's like, no, they were
It's
intentionally
intentional. Exactly.
quieted, right? And I
Right.
think that that's an important point that I'm not sure we make that point enough.
Yeah, there's another layer to the world that we don't know about, and I think that that's what that movie and the book was trying to highlight. And this is
Mm.
a journey that I've been on for some time, but that movie really changed my energy level. It shifted me to propel even further. I mean, there's so many things around us that were created by African Americans. So when you go and mail a letter, that blue mailbox, that was actually patented by an African American man.
Mm.
That blows. I mean, I'm just blown away by some of these facts because for me, as an African American scientist, I would have loved to know that people who look like me made some of the things that are around me. I always felt like a visitor. And when I
Mm.
learned about these things, I realized that no, I'm not a visitor. I actually come from a lineage of people who have made significant contributions. But again, their stories have been intentionally covered over or hidden.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess that I've wanted to ask that, and what an important point is, like, how would your life have maybe been different? Obviously, this is speculative.
Yeah.
There's not one answer to this, but how would your life have been different if a book like the book that you just wrote
Hmm.
existed for you? Like, were there little nuggets that you were able to tap into when you were a child that did inspire you? Or do you really feel like your career trajectory was in many ways in spite of the fact that all of these wonderful, rich stories were hidden from you?
That is a good point. I definitely feel that my trajectory right now is in response to in response to what society has done. Particularly, I feel like I'm in the mode of uncovering these stories, so that other people have a better journey or more inclusive journey than my own.
Mm.
I went through the whole engineering STEM pipeline, which is a very unwelcoming environment. It's better now, but when I left that, when I, got my degrees, I made a promise to myself that I wanted to make other people's journeys better than my own. And I didn't know what that meant. First, I thought that meant being a teacher, so I taught for a while. And that certainly was one way to do that. But now it's uncovering these stories as we're talking about, so that other people see the reflection and know that, hey, even though I may be the only woman in this class or the only African American in this class, this is just, I'm part of this long lineage of other people who have done great things before me. And so I wanted people to have access to that.
And so let's dive into that a little bit. Obviously, this book is about Jim West. It's the first in a Black Innovator series, which is very exciting to know that there will be more books. And do I take it they'll be written by different authors, illustrated by different illustrators? Or is this all going to be your series?
Well, wouldn't that be nice? I do have I do have two others that are in the works. One that's
Oh,
coming out
yay.
next year, in 2026. It's about Gladys West, African American mathematician who had a hand in shaping GPS.
Oh, very, very
So
cool.
she's next. I hope that this continues because it's so necessary.
Oh, absolutely. So let's dive in a little bit more. Let's talk about Jim West. We sort of teed it up. You sort of mentioned that you met him at Bell Labs, but let's go back. Tell me what you know. How did he get started? And sort of what was the time period that we're talking about?
Sure. So Jim West was born in 1931. So this is after the Great Depression. He was a
This is
farm.
almost 100 years ago,
Well,
Anissa.
he's 94. He's
I
94.
know. Can you
And he's
believe
still
it?
working. I mean, he's
Ah, it's
still working.
incredible.
Yeah, he's still working. And he still has he has an edge, like he's very sharp. Like that has not gone away at all. So
Wow.
so at the shadow of the Depression is when he was born. He lived on a farm, his grandmother's farm in Virginia. And he was known to be a very rambunctious boy. He would be places that they would tell him not to go. Don't go underneath the house. Don't go in the tree. Don't go by the well. Those are all the places that he'd love to be. And so he was known to be a very rambunctious boy. And when he was inside of the house, well, this is when he often got in trouble because he loved to have a screwdriver and pliers, and he would take things apart, as we mentioned before, like his grandfather's clock, but also his toys, his brother's toys. Nothing was beyond his purview in terms of taking things apart, and he was doing it from the point of view where he was curious. It's not that he was being mischievous; he was just curious. And that curiosity is what drove him to learn more about how the world works. He
Mhm.
he stumbled onto an old radio. He thought he fixed it. He plugged it in, nearly got electrocuted. Now, most people would say, "Hey, maybe I'll leave this electricity thing alone." That's not what happened to him. He's like, "You know what? I got to figure out more about what electricity is." And so this put him on the path to want to study physics. His parents tried to talk him out of studying physics or studying science because at the time it was very difficult for an African American to work as a scientist. You could study as a scientist, but to be employed as a scientist. And so this is one of the things that he had to face: opposition from his own family, in order to pursue the thing that he really loved, which is to learn more about how the world worked. So he had to figure
Wow.
out how he was going to study science. And so he went to Temple. He lived with distant relatives to keep the cost of things down, and he repaired televisions to make some money because this was his pursuit. He wanted to know more about physics. And it just happens that one day he sees an advertisement for a summer internship at Bell Laboratories, and he applies and he gets it. And as an intern, he's given this important project. They say, please make these headphones. So he makes the headphones and he does it in record time. And they're like, this guy's amazing. And he actually goes back to school.
And so headphones exist, and he's just making a better pair?
Yes, he's making
Okay.
headphones because good question. Thanks for
Mhm.
the nudge. He's making headphones because there's certain scientists they study. So this is Bell Laboratories. It studies the telephone, but it studies how our bodies, particularly our hearing, responds to the telephone. And
Mm,
so they need to make special headphones to test how well our ears respond to different tones and
mm,
how we can separate a tone. Like what's the shortest duration a tone can have so that we will understand that it is one tone and not many tones combined together. So they
mhm.
needed very precise headphones to do that, and they asked Jim to make them. And so he looks up some paper in the Bell Labs library, and he figures it out. He figures it out quickly than they think this is going to take all summer. He figures it out in no time. And so,
Wow.
they're like, okay, this kid is very, very bright. But when he goes back to college, those headphones stop working. And
Mm.
so they're like, okay, what's up with your headphones? So he comes back to Bell Laboratories to work on the headphones, and he's putting things together. And one day things are not connected, but the headphone is making a strange sound. And he's like, that shouldn't be the case because it needs to be plugged in. It needs to be connected to a battery in order to work. This is where Jim makes his discovery.
Mm.
Inside of his headphones is this material, a plastic that actually stores charge. And that's why the headphone works. It doesn't need the battery that he's attached to it. And this is profound because he makes the leap. Well, if it can be used for a headphone, can it be used for a microphone? Microphones, in order for them to work, they required very, very large batteries. So if this
Mm.
material doesn't need a battery, can I make a microphone out of it? And can I make a very small microphone out of it? And this is what he creates. This is and making this small microphone allows this to be something that could be used in hearing aids, lapels, cell phones. This strange material, which is called an electret, which stores charge, allows him to miniaturize the microphone.
Oh, wow. And so he didn't, I mean, I can imagine that there's no way he foresaw all of I mean, not all of them, but even kind of the main uses of this invention when he was first dreaming it up.
No, I mean he's working on the microphone and just wants to explore where it can be used and how well it works. So he goes to different places. He told me that he went to uh, a jazz club to test how well his microphone worked, and it worked well there. He went to the world's quietest room, which is located at Bell Laboratories. It was able to capture sounds cleanly there. So he just tested where it could be used, and he wrote papers. You know, he's more on the academic side, so he wrote papers and then just sent those papers out. Bell
Yeah.
Labs didn't make the microphone, and his bosses actually expected him and his colleague Gerhard Sessler to create a company to make a microphone. But they're like, no, 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 we're staying at Bell Labs. This is too cool. There's so much science that you can do here. We're not interested in the money. We want to just do really compelling compelling research. It ends up that another company started making the microphones, and then it just took off.
So I have to ask then, because this is a man who is still alive, you're able to ask him point blank, like, did he make any money on his invention?
So many people ask him that, and I asked him, and no, he didn't make any money. If you're at Bell Laboratories, so I was a scientist there, you sign your patent. The patent is owned by the company, so you might get a little bit of money from the company for the patent, but you don't make money from the licensing. So no, he didn't.
Wow.
He didn't make the cajillions that he could have made. But if you
But it
ask him, he's
Mhm.
really not worried about that either.
Really? And so my assumption is, obviously, without getting into the details of his financial situation,
Right.
he was at a very large, corporation at a time when he probably had not just a salary, but insurance and a pension and all of the things that make it so that working at a company like that, where you have resources, where you have support, where you have teams, and you have the security that you can kind of spend the rest of your life, or as long as you want to there, thrive, and then retire comfortably.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to describe how a scientist at Bell Labs thinks.
Mm.
You're essentially a playground. You can work on anything you want. Any toy piece of equipment that you need is available to you. The smartest people in the world come to visit you. It is a playground. So money, of course, you're comfortable. You can pay your bills. You're wearing, you've got clean clothes on. You can pay,
Mhm.
all those things are handled. But you're really focused on the unique opportunity that you can do research that you cannot do anywhere else. And
Mm.
with a man who's so driven by his curiosity, he can just wake up one morning and have an idea and he can pursue it. He doesn't really need to run it by his boss.
Yeah,
So
that's really cool.
that's the thrust. That's the drive. It's so not getting money because he didn't get a microphone. He's satisfied that he can wake up one morning and not know what he's going to achieve by the end of the day because he could just follow his curiosity.
And he, I was going to say was and is living at a time when, I mean, it's sort of fundamental to our conversation today. There simply weren't or aren't still to this day enough elevated, I should say, enough magnified, microphoned, even you could say, voices
Mhm.
of sort of Black excellence to inspire young people to realize, oh, that's not a job for them. That's also a job for me. That's a job for any of us. And so what ends up happening, and I'm curious if you talked to him about this at all, and I'm actually curious about your experience in this world, is there's almost a pressure or an onus to wear the hat of not just the bench scientist who gets to explore your curiosity every day, but also now the representative of, Black science. Now you need to be a mentor, you need to be a
Mm.
writer, you need to go give these talks, you need to sit on this panel. Did he and I think for a lot of people that's an honor, but for some people it can be a burden. I'm curious if a part of his sort of ethos at Bell Labs and beyond was to inspire young Black scientists and engineers.
The short answer is absolutely.
Hmm.
See, his mom, she actually was a hidden figure. She worked at
Mm.
Langley Aeronautical Air Force Base and
Wow.
helped calculate some of the space trajectories.
She was a calculator.
She
That's
was a
so
calculator. She could have
cool.
been in that movie, Matilda West.
Yeah.
Now, she was fired because she was an activist for the NAACP.
Oh my God.
And so Jim had those tendencies of activism from his mom. And so when he lands at Bell Laboratories, and Bell Laboratories doesn't have many African Americans in it. In fact, the first African American who's working in the technical field was in 1942, and that was Lincoln Hawkins. He was a mentor for Jim West. So Jim did get to see his reflection, but he couldn't see very much behind him in terms of the next generation. So
Mm.
he has these tendencies from his mom to be an activist. So he actually started a summer program for African Americans to come and work at Bell Laboratories. So there's hundreds of people who've benefited from Jim's research in creating the microphone, but also in opening the door so that other people have an opportunity to work at such an esteemed place.
Oh, it's incredible. And so by the time you were there, you were, like you said, a newly minted PhD, sort of fresh out of academia. Was the landscape really different than it probably was for Jim when he first started? Like, did you, I mean, I think we often say things are better than they were, but that doesn't mean they're better all the way. You know what I mean? And so, like,
Yeah,
no, it
right.
means we still got a long way to go.
We got a long way to go. Yeah. I mean, for
Yeah.
my own trajectory, I didn't have a Black professor in the sciences until I was in graduate school. Now, that's a
Mhm.
long time, long, long time. In fact, yeah, he was just my first Black professor, period. He didn't have to be in engineering or anything like that. And so that's a
Wow.
long time to just remain motivated. So when I got
Yeah.
to Bell Laboratories, as I mentioned, for Jim, it was like being a kid in the candy shop. It was the same thing for me because I saw a huge, diverse population. The chemist, the head of the chemistry department was a woman.
Mhm.
Jim West was there. Like all the things that I had to imagine as being a possibility was actually in practice. So for me, I never wanted to leave.
Ugh. But you're not there anymore, are
I'm
you?
not there anymore, but it's not really there anymore either.
Yeah,
So
true.
it's not like it wasn't intentional, but yeah. So I got to see a little bit of the rose before it fell.
Mhm.
And then, there was a telecommunication bust. And as a
Mhm.
result of that, a lot of talent, particularly in the physical sciences, those who are chemists, those who are mechanical engineers, those who are physicists, they all had to kind of scatter and find other positions. And so I was one of those people. And after about 4 years at Bell Laboratories, then I went off to be a professor at Yale.
And it's interesting to think about the way that, I mean, this is sort of a natural ebb and flow of this type of innovation, right? Is that there's I guess you could call it a whole field because it's not just, one invention. Although you mentioned Bell Labs, started, it was kind of around the telephone, but there's so much that goes into that. And when you have a sort of technology that is dominant on the landscape and that requires whole industries, that requires whole institutions dedicating all the best and the brightest to it, eventually those technologies evolve and change, and some things fall out of fashion with new technologies that replace them. And what's so cool about Jim's story is that microphone is almost more relevant today than it was even then.
Yeah, well, Jim is also very good I mean, he's 94, but he always keeps his finger on the pulse of what is the next question. And sometimes it's answered with his microphone. So his microphone can register sound, it can register vibration. So he made a special stethoscope based on his microphone, and it can detect things better than doctors. So also Formula One racers needed better ways to communicate. It's very noisy when you're driving, 100 miles per hour. So he
Mhm.
made another type of microphone that can isolate the sound. So he's solving a lot of problems with his microphone, but he's also just seeing what are the important problems that are out there, and pursuing them. So he keeps very relevant. The microphone is a technology that can be applied to different things, but he's also saying, okay, well, how else? What other problems can I solve? Because he's just very, very clever.
Oh, I love it. So he's probably made money off of some of those.
I hope so. Well, yeah, he's figured it out. He's now, he's now a professor at Johns Hopkins. He has a daughter named Ellington, and she's an entrepreneur. So somebody's doing well.
Oh my God, what a great name.
Yeah, it's a
I
great
love
name.
that so
Yeah.
much. Yeah. And so, it's such an interesting thing to have. I don't know. And I wonder how common it is anymore to sort of have a lane and to be able to make a career where you not that he stayed in that lane. I mean, he used that lane as sort of a jumping off point and continued to innovate, continued to um collaborate and continue to find new uses for his inventions. But I guess that is kind of the way of an inventor. And you are so lucky in that you are a material scientist, but you are also a science communicator. So you have talked to countless people who are in that world, creative types who look at the natural world, who look at synthetic materials and go, how can I put these things together to solve a problem? I think it's something we take for granted kind of in our modern world that's so full of technology that every single piece of what we use on our everyday kind of trajectory had to be dreamed up and troubleshooted and frustrating nights beating one's head against the wall before it could so seamlessly and cleanly work. But
Absolutely.
I'm just so curious about the life. I mean, I guess there's no one answer to this, but the life of an inventor today, because I think we have this lone genius mentality in our heads, which is just not the way. It's just
Mm.
it's such a silly story,
Hmm.
but it's a story that everybody's been told, and we think about Tesla or like you mentioned before, like Alexander Graham Bell, but that's not the way that scientists work today, is it?
No, and it's not the way that scientists worked back then either.
Right.
Um, so you're right. Everything that we have around us, someone thought about it and tested it to make it possible. And particularly when we're talking about Jim and his microphone, we're thinking, oh, microphone, that's it. It's very easy. But he had to figure out what was the best materials to make the microphone, how he can make his microphone sound better. All this took like iterative steps to make it possible. So what we have today was based on a lot of work and a lot of collaboration. Jim was very good at collaborating. He worked with Gerhard Sessler, but he worked with anybody. In fact, I think that's the reason why he was willing to have lunch with me, because he's like, well, is this going to be a future collaborator, or is she just going to be a fangirl? And ended up by just being a fangirl. But
A
in terms
fangirl
of
who was deeply inspired by him, though. Now
say,
there's a now
I'm
there's a
okay.
beautifully illustrated book about it.
A useful fangirl. So,
Yeah.
but in terms of the lone genius, I don't know why that was created. Maybe it was just to push people out, like this is not available to you. But Edison had people he called the muckers. They worked in the muck, so that's why he called them the muckers. And he had over a dozen men. They were men who made his ideas come to life. He would have an idea. He's like, you know what? I'm thinking about inscribing sound onto a cylinder. Yeah, make it happen. And that's the phonograph. Like they did the hands-on machining. He just came up with the idea.
Mm.
And so this myth of the lone genius, it never existed, but it's one of those narratives that we love to have in the United States, but it's absolutely not true. People work in collaboration. They get inspiration from different things. Anybody can be an inventor. If you put a sandwich together in a new way, that makes you an inventor. Everybody can be an inventor. And I think this notion of separating inventors from the rest of the world is one of the problems that kind of makes it's kind of one of the problems why we're where we are today, because don't think that they can create, and they just want to consume. And that's the American way.
Yeah, I'm glad that you made that sort of turn there, because I think it bears repeating, this idea that the myth of the lone genius, which really is a myth, I believe is deeply pernicious,
Mm,
because it not only doesn't inspire individuals to be able to engage with their peers and to be able to lean on because it does, it takes like a village, right? It takes a whole
mhm,
community. um, but I think it's also, in some ways, it's not the reason we are where we are right now, but it's one of the myriad reasons
mhm,
that we are where we are right now. This cult of personality, this idea, like we think about an Elon Musk, right? Back
mhm,
when he was first founding Tesla, or should I say, bought Tesla,
mhm,
and
mhm,
back when he was first, in the earliest stages of SpaceX,
mhm,
he was described very similarly to an Alexander Graham Bell, a Tesla. But, I think most of us have seen through the sheen, and we understand that this was a very, very rich man
mhm,
who dared to dream and knew how
mhm.
to hire people that could,
Right.
make his vision come to life. And obviously, a lot of other fraught things. Um, a lot. But I think that it's this idea of the cult of personality. I guess my concern about it is that it gives people inordinate power, because there's the halo effect, right? The minute
Mm,
that we deify somebody and say that person is a lone genius, let them work, let them do, we almost stop questioning their methods and their tactics. And if that person gets me too'd, if that person has, deeply eugenicist tendencies, if that person
mm,
has other uh, things that are really, really disconcerting, there's a tendency, I think, for people to go, oh, well, it's all kind of in the service to this
mm,
genius, so let's sort of
mhm.
ignore it. And that's very dangerous.
I agree. I mean, if everyone just realized that everyone is a genius, then we would remove the pedestal that we have these individuals on. Everyone is good at something, but we are taught we're not as good as this person, and so we're going to allow them to do whatever they're doing, and we're just going to follow them. We're going to just be their fans. And I think that's very dangerous, because we're giving up our own internal power, not only
Mm.
to create and to think critically, but it also leads to giving up our power in a democracy, because we're like, well, what am I going to do? I'm just one person. And if we all were in touch with how we can create, then we would see the value of what we make, and then we would see the value of our own voices. But I think these myths are in place on purpose, so that
Mhm.
we will just stay in our boxes, very quiet, and do what these very rich people are allowed to do.
I agree. I think it's fundamentally a part of that really important word, hidden, right?
Mm, yes.
It's very intentional. And the truth of the matter is, all of these people that have the mythology built around them of being the lone genius, when we really start to break it apart, what we start to understand, and I wouldn't be surprised if even Jim said this, and Jim is somebody who was facing inordinate shall we say, barriers to
Mhm.
entry within his fields. But even he would probably say, what's different about me versus anybody else who had brilliant ideas but didn't see them realized is that I was lucky. Right? It's like I might have worked hard, but that other person over there worked hard too. They just didn't find the opportunity that I found. And I think that that's what happens over and over again when we see individuals who come from an oppressed class.
Mm.
They may have had far fewer opportunities, but obviously one of Jim's skills was to be able to push through that and to be able to find those niches and continue. Obviously, there are a million examples of people out there who had every opportunity thrown at them, and it was, the privilege to thrive was much easier. But when I think about all of the people out there whose names we don't know,
Mhm.
all of the sort of unrealized opportunities, all of the creativity that was thwarted, I mean, it's innumerable. It's super depressing when you start to think about it, but they weren't lucky.
Well, I think Jim would, if you met Jim,
Mhm.
he doesn't come off apologetic. He's kind
Mm.
of unstoppable. He really is a force. Here he
Hmm.
is as a young man. He wants to study physics. His parents tell him, no, we're not going to support you. We're going to take away your money. He's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm doing it anyway.
Right.
And then when he and he does it, he figures out how to do it. And when he was at Bell Laboratories, he starts making programs for African Americans, and he could have risked being fired. He didn't care,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So there are those who see themselves as lucky. There's an opportunity, but he's a little different. He's really a force.
Yeah. He made his own luck.
He
And
made
I
his
think
own.
it's
He made his own luck. You
yeah.
you had to either be faster or get out of the way. That is Jim
Mhm.
West.
Yeah. And I think it's one of those really tough things when we think about it from a sociologic perspective.
Mhm.
This idea, I think there's this American ethos, which is a dangerous ethos, which is a very pull yourself up by your bootstraps, make your own luck. But there are
Mhm.
so many others that would have been in Jim West's shoes who might have done all the same things and might not have taken no for an answer and still didn't get the
I
job,
agree. I agree.
and
I
still
agree.
weren't able to do that. And so it is that fine line, and it is that sort of combination of luck and privilege and grit and
Mhm.
opportunity. And I guess the thing that I often think about, I think it was a Stephen Jay Gould quote. I've mentioned it on the show before, and I'm sure I'm going to butcher it. But it was like, it's something like, I'm less interested in studying the folds of Einstein's brain than I am in um, identifying or discovering all of the people who had brilliant ideas that were unrealized. Like there are
Yeah.
just so many. I love the way that you put it. Everybody has genius in them. Everybody is a genius. And so much of the work is to tap into the thing
Mhm.
that makes you unique and leaning into it instead of our tendency to
Mhm.
lean away from that thing, that quirk that
Mhm.
makes us stick out in a
Right.
in a effort to kind of better fit in with the flow.
Right. 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 We need to not. We need to have less fear.
Mhm.
I listen to this inspirational speaker, Les Brown, from time to time, and he's like, where's the place with the most ideas on the planet? And people raise their hand and they're like, MIT or Harvard. And he's like, no, the cemetery.
Mm.
So many people
Yeah.
have great
Yeah.
ideas and they never pursued them because they were too afraid.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, and so I try and I wrote this book Spark because I wanted kids to see their reflection. Do you take stuff
Yeah.
apart? You might be the person who makes the next big thing. Are you curious? That is actually a superpower. Don't let anybody take your curiosity away. That's one of the problems that we're talking about. That we've lost our curiosity. We just follow what we hear. We don't probe it. We don't interrogate it. We just follow along. And this is the tool of that myth. And what I
Mhm.
want kids to do is be so entrenched with curiosity so that when they become an older person, no one can shake that they will
Yeah.
remain that way. And so that's what I hope that this book does. And that is the gift of Jim West, that he is just a curious individual and it makes him unshakable and unstoppable.
Oh, I love that so much. And I see what you did there with that title, that dual meaning there of spark. It's so good because I think that point really does bear repeating, that there are critical and often, in neurobiology we'll use the word like sensitive periods. We don't want to call them critical periods
Mm,
because uh I guess that's a little bit all or nothing. But there are, I'm going to use the word critical periods. There are critical periods in the development of a child, an adolescent, a teenager, and a young adult, where if they don't feel not just inspired, but also empowered at
Mm,
certain points along the way, it's very easy, the developing brain, to become self-defeating, to
mm,
say that, and it's not even like an intentional or a conscious choice to say, I'm not good enough. That's not for me. I would
mhm,
never be able to do that. It's like everything that they are exposed to is
mhm,
telling them, not
mhm,
for you. For somebody who's exceptional, that's not you.
mhm,
And if we can, as a society, pick up that torch and really change the narrative, like you mentioned, that no, everybody has it in them.
mhm,
Find your genius and let's
mhm,
foster it and let's not thwart it. I mean, think about how much more compelling, think about how much innovation we would have. And I guess that turns me to a place where, yes, this is a children's book, but it is an adult podcast, because it's not
mhm.
going to be the kids listening to this show that go out and buy that book. It's going to be their parents.
Right.
One of the things that I would love to talk about, if you're comfortable, is the landscape we're in right now. We do seem to be moving in the wrong direction for innovation, for fostering curiosity. We seem to be uh, underneath an administration right now that is doing pretty much everything they can to sabotage
Mhm.
all of these values and ethics that are celebrated in your book. And so, you mentioned at the very beginning of the show, we talked about that MIT event that we last saw each other at, and I was like, "Ooh, it got dark a little bit," and you were like, "Yeah, but that was right at the beginning, before we had hope, before we had ideas about what to do." And I was like, "We have hope, we have ideas about what to do. Please share them, Ainissa." So I am curious where your head is at with regards to the pressures that we're feeling from the very top, and how you're maintaining that sort of hope, how you're able to sit down and write a book like this given the landscape we're in.
That's a good question. Um, well, first I wanted to say I wrote the book because I wanted to provide reflections so that other people can see themselves besides um, the standard image of a scientist. I wanted people to say, "Oh, this person looks like me, or looks like my uncle, or this could be someone I know." So that's the
Mhm.
reason why I do the work that I do. Now, in terms of hope, uh, we have to remember that all of us have ancestors that had it far worse. They
True.
left countries, went on a boat, went to Ellis Island. They underwent far worse things than we are experiencing right now. And
Yeah.
so we have in our DNA we have strong people in our DNA. And so that was their moment to get through that very, very hard thing. This is ours. We have to
Mm.
figure out how we overcome the tools that they had, the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement. Those tools don't necessarily apply now because we have this crazy thing called the internet, and lives can move very, very fast. So we have to figure out, we have to adjust, because the tools that we had back then was when we were in a democracy. We're not in that now. So
Yeah.
so it requires a retooling. But the reason why I have hope is that we have ancestors that experienced far worse. And the work that I'm doing now is the work that an artist or a writer should be doing. This is when we write. This is what Toni Morrison said. Not when it's happy and sunny. We write now. We try and capture the things that people are trying to erase so that the next generation will have that information. So I'm writing this book. It's sort of like I just put tulip bulbs in my backyard. I put those tulips in there so that eventually they will grow and maybe someone else will appreciate them. And so that's the reason why I wrote the book. It's similar to the tulips. I write this and maybe someone will appreciate it down the road. The work I do now will be appreciated down the road. So
Oh,
that's the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing.
I love that mentality. I think it's so important. And I would even sort of, it inspires me to think about, this idea that our ancestors, and what a beautiful thought. Like, I could not be here unless I was, somebody gave birth to me, somebody
Mm,
gave birth to my mother, and
mm,
my father, and so on and so on. And they survived very, very difficult things, and they passed on a lot of that kind of genetic grit to me.
mm,
Um, I also like to think about the fact, so there's this sort of, like, I guess you could call that a lineage. But also, if we go away from the vertical and we look to the horizontal, I'm often inspired by the fact when I travel internationally, when and this is one of the, I think, privileges of working in academia or doing science communication, is being able to know a lot of people from a lot of different places and even
Mhm.
visit some of those places where those people are from. I am always shaken out of my self-loathing and out of my depression and out of my cynicism
Mhm.
when I realize that there are people, so many people in so many parts of this globe who are like, we've been through this. Like
Mm.
what you're facing right now in the US,
Right.
that's been my entire life. Or
Right.
that is, that's what I was born into in the country
Right.
where I live. And
Right.
I think seeing that those people are continuing, that they are thriving, that they are contributing, and
Mhm.
that they are, finding joy and hope, it shakes me out of this sort of like American exceptionalist privilege and going like,
Mhm.
okay, we'll get through this. I know
Yeah.
we will.
Yeah, we were very spoiled. The 70s to about 2010.
Mm,
Most of us were adults in that time. Those were kinda like the best years for America, you know?
mm,
When you think about the rights that we had, healthcare, but that we think is constant. We're like, that's what we were born into, and we're like, "This is how it should be." But no, that's not. That was made possible because people fought the decades
yeah,
before that. And
yeah.
so now we are doing we had our moment. Now we have to get to work.
Absolutely. And I'm just so grateful to you, to other individuals who are doing work similar to yours, to tell these important and inspiring stories from our past and our present in the hopes that they will inform and motivate future generations to be able to engage, because without all of our citizens tapping in to their genius, we will not thrive as a society. We cannot only empower one privileged segment of our society. We know what happens when we do that. There's so much is lost, so much is hidden, and it's just so important that all of the individuals, regardless of their, skin color, regardless of their religion, regardless of their immigration status, their orientation, you name the intersectional ways that people have been sort of oppressed and quieted throughout history. When all of those individuals are empowered, are
Mhm.
amplified, and are motivated to find their genius, we will only have more innovation. We will only have a more, I guess, exquisite choreography, a more exquisite dance in this country and on this planet to function in a way that humanity wants to function. And it takes voices like yours to ensure that that happens.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm doing my small part, but if the reason why things are the way they are is because they're trying to keep us distracted.
Hmm.
Because if we
Yeah.
knew our individual power, that you are creative this way and you can do this and you can probe this, then we would be a force that they could not overcome. So they put in these things to distract us. And so I'm writing this book to remind us that, hey, curiosity is a superpower. Try and
Mm,
tap into that. So if you're curious about this individual, maybe you'll ask questions about other things too, and keep
yeah.
asking questions until you're satisfied. They're trying to prevent that from happening. But if we ask questions and tap into our own creativity and tap into our own and tap into our own geniuses, we've said a couple of times, then we are unstoppable. We really are unstoppable. But it requires a big shift, and so I'm doing my small part to make the next generation more curious.
Oh, I love it so much. Wake up, everybody. There are hundreds of millions of us.
They
We are
are.
unstoppable.
We are unstoppable. I mean, gee, there's
I
we
mean, billions across the globe,
right.
but
If
even
we
here in
worked
this
in
same,
concert,
yeah.
we would be a dangerous force. But there's just so much pulling on us in so many different ways, so many distractions that we can't work together because there's just so much on our plates. But
Mhm.
but that's intentional. That's intentional.
Absolutely, and we can rise above it.
We will.
Ah, I'm just so grateful. I'm so glad that I ran into you. I'm so glad that we were
Ditto.
able to have this conversation and get it on the books, that you had the time to share with us. And I'm so grateful for all of your hard work. I'm excited to see the next installation, I guess, of this wonderful series. Everybody, the book is Spark: Jim West's Electrifying Adventures in Creating the Microphone by Dr. Ainissa Ramirez. Ainissa, thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for this opportunity.
And everybody listening, thank you for coming back week after week. I'm really looking forward to the next time we all get together to talk nerdy.